Hello everyone, we are back once again. Today we will be going over Jacob's life and his story and everything that happens in it. This is going to be pretty long. This is definitely the most amount of notes that I've taken over anyone or anything in the Bible yet. I'm sure we've all heard of Jacob wrestling the angel. We're gonna go into that. Honestly, it's just a tiny portion of everything we're going to get into. There are other people in this story that are very important, particularly Jacob's son Joseph, so he's going to get a lot of spotlight as well later on. But as for now, let's hear about the story of Jacob and how he fits in the Bible. I'm going to start off with some quick facts about Jacob, such as where he's from and when he was born. And if you remember just the other day, we went over Job's story, so I will be referencing him. Jacob is firmly placed in the biblical timeline, unlike Job. Estimated dates: around 2000 to 1800 BC would be around the time of Jacob's birth. Same general era as Abraham, Isaac, and early human civilization growth. Abraham and Isaac are important figures as well that I have not gone over yet. The Bible gives clear genealogical markers. Jacob is the grandson of Abraham and the son of Isaac, and twin brother of Esau, Esau. Where did Jacob live? Jacob's story spans 4 major regions. I'm looking up all these pronunciations. First, Beersheba, his home with Isaac in Genesis 26:27, and then Padan Aram, or later Haran, in Genesis 28:31, and then Gilead and Canaan. That's where he wrestles with God in Genesis 32:33, and then lastly Egypt, where he lives his final years under Joseph, his son, Genesis 46:50. Okay, now that we have the grounds, let's go into Jacob's story. The prophecy: 2 nations in Rebekah. So Rebekah is Jacob and Esau's mother. In Genesis chapter 25, verse 22 and 23, we read, "The children struggled together in my womb, and she said, 'If it is so, why am I this way?' So the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." So Jacob's life starts in a prophecy, which he's the grandson of Abraham, so it's following that lineage. Esau, Jacob's twin brother, and Jacob will each become the father of a distinct people. Later in history, Esau is the leader of the Edomites, and then Jacob becomes the leader of the Israelites. Esau is born first. Jacob comes out holding Esau's heel. So I suppose this is symbolic language trying to represent him fighting for first place because he wanted to be the firstborn and all the blessings that come with being a firstborn. And we're going to get into that. Esau becomes a hunter. Jacob is quiet and stays among the tents. So he stays home for the most part. 2 people shall be separated from the verse. Even though they are twins, their descendants will grow into different groups with different identities. This is the future telling of Jacob and Esau. 1 will be stronger, the older will serve the younger. Normally the firstborn, or Esau, would inherit leadership and the main blessing. So that's the benefits of being the firstborn. So they were symbolically in the womb fighting for first place. And Esau came out first. The birthright purchase, Genesis 25 verses 29 through 34. Happens years later when both twins are grown. Esau comes home exhausted and starving from hunting. Jacob is cooking stew. The transaction: Esau asks for food. Jacob says, "Sell me your birthright first." So give me the older position. Give me the more blessed firstborn position. And I'll give you some of this stew. The birthright, firstborn privileges, double inheritance, and leadership of the family. Esau, focused on immediate hunger, agrees. So Esau just gives his whole blessing birthright away because he was so hungry from hunting. Jacob gives him the stew, gladly. Esau swears the oath. So Esau, by oath, agrees to him having this birthright for some stew. By taking it, Jacob begins fulfilling the prophecy, the younger will lead. So this was supposed to happen. It was told that the older will serve the younger. So now the story is aligning more with God's word. Esau's impulsiveness contrasts with Jacob's long-term strategy, as we saw in the stew incident. Jacob receives Isaac's blessing, Genesis 27. Isaac, their father, is old and nearly blind. He intends to give his patriarchal blessing to Esau, the firstborn, like normal. Rebekah's role, their mom. She overhears Isaac and instructs Jacob to disguise himself as Esau. And then since he's blind, she gets Jacob to disguise himself. However, he needed to do that for someone that's blind. So then she helps Jacob disguise himself as Esau. Maybe she did this because she already knew about the oath and giving it to the younger brother Jacob. But regardless, Jacob brings food and wears Esau's clothes and hair coverings. Isaac blesses Jacob, thinking he is Esau. The blessing confirms God's prophecy. Jacob, the younger brother, will inherit leadership in the covenantal promises. Aftermath. Esau discovers the deception and is furious. He vows to kill Jacob. Jacob flees to Haran to escape Esau's anger. When Jacob flees Esau in Canaan, he goes to Haran to stay and work for his uncle Laban. So, even though Esau gave his oath for some stew, that he could have the firstborn promises and blessings, he still got very heated with Jacob, vowing to kill him. So Jacob is like, all right, I gotta go. So then he dips. But he's blessed now he has the firstborn less blessings, even though he is the younger brother. Jacob's latter vision, Genesis 28 verses 10 through 22, occurs as Jacob travels to Haran after fleeing Esau. Dream, Jacob sees a ladder or staircase reaching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. God's message reaffirms the covenant made to Abraham and Isaac. Land for Jacob's descendants, numerous offspring, blessing for all nations through his lineage. Jacob sets up a stone pillar at the dream site, pours oil on it, and vows loyalty to God, calling the place Bethel. So God communicates with Jacob through a dream, and this dream reaffirms the covenant, the promise, the agreement, the blessings made to Abraham and Isaac, now coming to Jacob. And then Jacob, in perhaps an act of sacrifice, sets up a stone pillar where he had the dream, pours oil on it, which is similar to anointing, and vows loyalty to God in an act of worship. Jacob meets Rachel and works for Laban, his uncle, in Genesis 29 through 31. Jacob arrives in Haran and meets Rachel at a well, works 7 years to marry Rachel, but Laban deceives him and gives him Leah instead. So Laban's his uncle. These are his daughters. So these are technically Jacob's cousins. I do not know how standard this was for that time. Not sure. I actually just found that out. But he's working for his deceptive uncle. And then he works another 7 years to marry Rachel. Laban repeatedly changes Jacob's wages, but God blesses Jacob's wealth and family growth. So his uncle Laban is incredibly deceptive and just a liar. Somebody that promises one thing and then switches up on you when it benefits him. Jacob fathers 12 sons and 1 daughter, Dinah, through Leah, Rachel, and their maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah, Z-I-L-P-A-H. So he has 13 kids with 4 different women. Jacob flees Laban and makes covenant. Genesis 31. God instructs Jacob to return home to Canaan. Jacob flees secretly, taking his family and livestock. So he just took his daughters away from him. Laban pursues him, but God warns Laban in a dream not to harm Jacob. At Gilead, they establish a boundary covenant. Jacob will not cross Laban's territory again, and Laban returns peacefully. This marks Jacob's independence and preparation to reclaim his inheritance. Jacob prepares to meet Esau, his brother. Genesis 32. Jacob learns Esau is approaching with 400 men, raising fear of confrontation. Strategic preparations. Jacob divides his camps into 2 groups in case one is attacked. Sends gifts ahead to appease Esau and prays for deliverance and protection. So it seems like Esau is still pretty upset about not having the firstborn inheritance and blessings. And Jacob's kind of freaking out. He doesn't know how or when Esau is going to show up, but he knows that he has 400 men with him. So he divides his camps because he doesn't know when he's coming, and he'd rather not everybody get attacked at once. Sends gifts to his brother Esau to get him to chill out a little bit, and he's praying for protection during all this. So he's pretty paranoid right now. He's kind of freaking out. Understandably so. Jacob wrestles with the mysterious man/angel of God. Genesis chapter 32, verse 22 through 32. At this point, Jacob is carrying the weight of his past. The stolen blessing, family conflicts, fear of Esau's revenge. Jacob is alone at night by the Jabbok River, fearing confrontation with Esau. a man appears and wrestles with Jacob until daybreak. The text calls him both a man and later associates him with God or an angel of God. The struggle lasts all night, symbolizing endurance, persistence, and transformation. Key points. Jacob refuses to let go without a blessing. At this point, Jacob's been fighting his entire life. In the womb with Esau, that's why he was grabbed onto his heel, constantly fleeing and strategizing, such as running from his brother and then running away from Laban, his uncle. During the wrestling, Jacob's hip is dislocated, showing that transformation also often involves struggle and vulnerability. After the night and wrestling had ended, the man says, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed." Jacob is blessed and emerges transformed spiritually and personally. So that is the most famous thing that happens from his life. This mysterious man in the middle of the night, while he's at a river, wrestles him. In this moment of deep turmoil, confusion, and paranoia, he wrestles Jacob until daylight, and Jacob refuses to give up. And then he changes his name. The man that wrestled him mysteriously changes his name. Perhaps this is why they call it an angel of God. But he changes his name to Israel. Jacob meets Esau peacefully. Genesis 33. Esau approaches with 400 men. And in the event, instead of conflict, Esau embraces Jacob, showing reconciliation. Outcome, Jacob settles in Canaan, continuing his family and covenantal legacy. So he's back in Canaan. Context for Esau approaching with 400 men. As of now, Esau is the leader of a clan. Years have passed. Esau has wives, children, servants, livestock, his own territory. He is no longer just Jacob's brother. He is the head of a people. In that ancient world, it was normal for clan leaders to travel with a small militia. Not because they were attacking, but because they protected the camp, they managed the herds, they traveled in groups, they represented authority. So it was normal back then to travel like this, especially if you were the leader of a clan. And then next, Jacob separated from Esau again. Genesis 33 verses 12 through 17. After they reconcile, Esau invites Jacob to travel with him to Seir or Edom, and Jacob declines politely. He does this because even though there is forgiveness, the prophecy still stands. 2 nations, 2 people separated, like in the original verse. So Jacob goes his own way. This fulfills the physical separation of the 2 nations, the symbolic dividing paths. Esau founding Edom, Jacob founding Israel. Jacob settles in Sukkot instead and builds shelters for his animals. Jacob arrives safely in Canaan, buys a piece of land, and builds an altar to the God who appeared to him. This means, 1, God's promise from the latter dream is coming true. He is back in the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and himself. 2, Jacob is no longer a wanderer. This is the first time Jacob truly belongs to a plot of land. 3, this land will become the early ground of the nation of Israel. All right, the Dinah, Jacob's daughter. Dinah, Jacob's daughter, is violated by Shechem, a local prince. Shechem asks to marry her. Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, are furious about this. The fact that he would do that to their sister and then have the audacity to ask to marry her. They were infuriated by this. So Jacob's sons trick the men of the city into circumcising themselves. They say, "We can only give our sister to you if all your men get circumcised." So I don't know the relevance of this back then, but I guess this was a relevant enough request for them to actually do it. While the men are recovering, they kill them all. So they trick all the men and kill them all while they're recovering when they couldn't do anything. Jacob, their father, is furious. Not about the outrage done to Dinah, but because he fears retaliation. "You have brought trouble on me. I am few in number." Genesis 34:30. So Jacob is now put in a similar paranoid position as he was right before wrestling the mysterious man or angel of God. After this, God calls Jacob back to Bethel, where he had the dream. Genesis 35, verses 1 through 15. This is the second encounter between God and Jacob. God says, "Go back to Bethel and make an altar." 35:1. This is where Jacob had the latter dream. Jacob returns, and the first thing he does is he purges his household of foreign gods. They bury idols under a tree. This is the first major spiritual house cleansing of Israel's family. So now we see we're referring to Jacob as Israel because his name changed after wrestling the angel. And they're taking all the idols, it's like the golden calf in Moses' story, where Moses goes to the mountain for 40 days, and then his people start freaking out because they can't hear God and Moses can. So they get this golden calf to worship because they need something tangible to worship. So here, Jacob, or Israel now, is getting rid of all the idols or anything that gets in the way of God's worship or sacrifice. 2, God reaffirms Jacob's new name, Israel. Jacob got the name originally in the wrestling match, but now God declares it again. This is sealing the identity. Jacob is officially Israel. Next, Rachel dies, one of his wives. Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, dies giving birth to Benjamin, and Jacob buries her on the way to Ephrath or Bethlehem. Right after Rachel dies, Reuben, Jacob's oldest son, sleeps with Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant and one of Jacob's wives. This is not just sexual sin. In the ancient world, this was a symbolic act of overthrow. It's as if Reuben was trying to increase his status or assert dominance over his father. The result, Reuben loses his firstborn privileges, which is the same thing that happened with Jacob and Esau. Not in the same way, but he was given the firstborn privileges even though he was the younger brother. Jacob goes to his father Isaac, whose story has been quiet for many chapters at this point. Isaac soon dies peacefully, and both Jacob and Esau bury him. Their joint burial of Isaac symbolizes the final closure of Jacob and Esau's long conflict. The prophecy still stands, 2 nations, but the brothers end in peace. The genealogy of Esau, Genesis 36. This entire chapter traces the rise of Esau's nation, the Edomites. Reasons this matters. 1, it fulfills the prophecy of 2 nations, one from Esau, Edom, and one from Jacob, Israel. 2, Esau becomes a powerful leader in the region of Edom. His line grows kings and chiefs long before Israel has any. 3, it marks the separation God spoke to Rebekah. 2 peoples shall be separated. Their stories diverge permanently at this point. And then Joseph's story begins, which is one of Jacob's children. Genesis 37. Joseph, Jacob's son through Rachel, becomes the central figure for the next 13 chapters, and he is crucial in the story of Jacob. Jacob, now Israel, shows favoritism to Joseph. Joseph gets the famous coat of many colors. Joseph has dreams where his family bows to him, which only increases the tension. Joseph's brothers grow jealous and hostile. This sets up the next major arc in Jacob's life. Joseph, Jacob's son, is sold into slavery, Genesis 37, verses 12 through 36. While Jacob is back in Canaan, Joseph is sent to check on his brothers. They conspire against him, they throw him into a pit, they sell him to Ishmaelites, traders heading to Egypt. They dip Joseph's coat in goat blood, and then they bring it to Jacob, their father. Jacob believes Joseph is dead. So if this has not shown you how violent and extra Joseph's brothers, Jacob's other sons, are, they killed a whole people group for what they did to their sister, which there could be some reason in that, but tricking and killing a whole people group is pretty insane. And then they're jealous of their older brother Joseph for how their dad treats him favorably, throw him into a pit, sell him to some traders heading to Egypt, and then just for fun, they take this coat, dip it in goat blood, and then bring it to their dad. Imagine the mentality of that. They're excited, laughing about it, it seems. They're like, oh, you know what would be funny? Let's dip it in goat blood and then show it to our dad. How do you think he'll react? Here's your favorite son. How you like your favorite son now, Dad? Like, damn, chill. Next, Judah and Tamar, Genesis 38. While Joseph is in Egypt, because he just got sold from his crummy brothers, this chapter seems out of place, but it is crucial for understanding the tribe of Judah. Judah, another son of Jacob, has a complicated family event with Tamar. This is where the royal line leading to King David and eventually Jesus is established. So that is just a little pivot to keep in mind the overarching prophecy rather than just what's happening with Jacob and his son Joseph. Joseph rises in Egypt and the famine approaches in Genesis 39 through 41. So now we're going to see what Joseph does in Egypt. Joseph rises in Egypt. Joseph has already been sold into slavery by his brothers, taken to Egypt, and bought by Potiphar. Up until now, Jacob thinks Joseph is dead. Joseph and Potiphar's house, Genesis 39, verse 1 through 6. Joseph is sold to Potiphar, an Egyptian official. Joseph is extremely capable. Everything he touches prospers. Potiphar notices this and puts Joseph in charge of his entire household. Joseph rises quickly in status, even as a foreign slave. Joseph is falsely accused, Genesis 39, verse 6 through 20. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce Joseph. Joseph refuses. She falsely accuses Joseph of attacking her. Potiphar throws Joseph in prison. So Potiphar's wife comes on to Joseph. Joseph says no way, and then she pettily accuses him of attacking her, ending him up in prison. Joseph in prison, Genesis 39 verses 20 through 23. Even in prison, Joseph rises to leadership. The warden sees Joseph's reliability. Joseph is put in charge of other prisoners. Joseph interprets dreams in prison, Genesis 40. 2 royal officials are imprisoned, the cupbearer, the baker. Each has a dream. Joseph interprets both. Cupbearer, restored, baker, executed. Joseph says, remember me when you are restored. So Joseph has a gift for interpreting dreams and telling the future from those dreams, it seems. And then Pharaoh's dream, Genesis 41, verse 1 through 8. Pharaoh has 2 disturbing dreams. 1, 7 healthy cows eaten by 7 thin cows, and 2, 7 full heads of grain swallowed by thin ones. No magician or wise man can interpret them. Joseph is remembered, Genesis 41, verse 9 through 14. The cupbearer had forgotten about Joseph for 2 full years. But he suddenly remembers Joseph. Pharaoh sends for Joseph. And I imagine he tells the Pharaoh, and then the Pharaoh sends for Joseph. Joseph is cleaned up and presented before Pharaoh. Now Joseph stands before the most powerful man in the region. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, Genesis 41, verses 15 through 32. Joseph explains 7 years of plenty are coming, 7 years of famine will follow. God has revealed this to Pharaoh so the kingdom can prepare. Joseph also gives wisdom on how to handle it. Joseph is elevated to second in command, Genesis 41, 33 through 45. Pharaoh is so impressed, he sets Joseph over all Egypt, gives him authority second only to Pharaoh, gives him an Egyptian name, gives him a wife. Joseph is now 30 years old. This is the final transformation, from slave to prisoner to prime minister of Egypt. What a run. Joseph is a go-getter. Joseph gathers massive amounts of grain. Egypt becomes the center of food security for the region. The 7 years of famine begin. Genesis 41, verses 53 through 57. The famine hits. Egypt is prepared. The surrounding lands are not. People from everywhere come to Egypt to buy grain, including Canaan, where Jacob lives. So since Joseph could interpret dreams and infer about the future from them, he did it with Pharaoh, interpreted both of his dreams into 7 years of what it sounds like prosperity, and then 7 years of a famine. And then all these people experiencing this famine have to come to Egypt now because they planned accordingly since they knew it was coming. And in Canaan, that's where Jacob is, who's been separated from Joseph because of what his slimy brothers did to him. This is the moment the 2 storylines, Jacob's family in Canaan and Joseph's rise in Egypt, begin to merge again. Jacob sends his sons to Egypt for grain, Genesis 42. This is where Joseph's entire arc and Jacob's entire arc finally intersect again. Joseph is second in command in Egypt. Jacob is starving in Canaan from the famine. Jacob hears there is grain in Egypt. The famine is severe in Canaan. Jacob says to his sons, "Go down to Egypt and buy grain for us, that we may live and not die." He sends 10 sons, but not Benjamin. Why? Benjamin is Rachel's only remaining son, as far as Jacob knows, because he doesn't know Joseph's still alive. Joseph was Rachel's firstborn and is quote-unquote dead. Benjamin is the new favorite, the last piece of Rachel he has left. Jacob refuses to risk him. The brothers meet Joseph, but don't recognize him. The brothers sent to Egypt meet Joseph, but none of them recognize that it's the brother that they sold away. Joseph recognizes his brothers immediately, but they do not recognize him. Because he is dressed as an Egyptian noble, speaks Egyptian through an interpreter, and has an Egyptian name. And it's been 20 years since they last saw him. They believe Joseph is dead. So they did this horrible thing to their brother. His dad thought he was dead this whole time, for 20 years, 2 decades. And it had been so long, and Joseph never found his way back, that they all just assumed that he had to have died. Little did they know that he was helping run Egypt. Joseph accuses them of being spies, so his brothers, who don't recognize him yet, in this powerful Egyptian position. This is not cruelty, but a test. Joseph wants to see, have they changed? Will they protect Benjamin? Are they still the same jealous men who sold him? He imprisons them for 3 days. So now he is really testing his brothers and seeing if they're the same people that essentially kicked him to the curb and sold him as a slave. Joseph tests them. Bring Benjamin. Joseph releases 9 brothers but keeps Simeon in custody. He tells them, "Do not return unless you bring your youngest brother." This forces them to involve Benjamin, Jacob's new favorite, and creates a moral test. Jacob says, "Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin?" The brothers return to Egypt with Benjamin, Genesis 43. The famine gets worse. Jacob is forced to send Benjamin. or they're all going to starve to death. Joseph sees Benjamin, his younger brother from his mom that died. Joseph is overwhelmed emotionally. He leaves the room to weep. So seeing his younger brother from his same mom and dad really hit him hard. This is the first time Joseph sees his full brother since he was a teenager. They all eat at Joseph's table, all the brothers. Joseph arranges the seating by birth order, shocking them. He gives Benjamin 5 times the portion of the others, another test to see what'll happen to the other brothers. Are their old inclinations still there? Are there petty, hostile reactions still a part of them? Joseph's final test, the silver cup, Genesis 44. Joseph tests whether the brothers will abandon Benjamin the way they abandoned him. Joseph plants his silver cup in Benjamin's bag. He sends the brothers away with grain, then sends his servant to accuse them of theft. They deny it. Sure, Benjamin is innocent, but Benjamin is caught with the cup because Joseph planted it there. Judah offers his life instead of Benjamin's. Judah gives one of the most powerful speeches in the Old Testament. He says, "Take me instead. If Benjamin does not return, our father will die of grief." This is a complete reversal of Genesis 37. Judah has transformed. This is the moment Joseph was waiting for. And then Joseph reveals himself, Genesis 45. Joseph weeps so loudly the entire palace hears him. He tells them, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" So now he reveals himself to the brothers, trusting more in their characters. He explains, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." So he's saying when they threw him in that pit, when they threw him in that pit, sold him to a traitor, dipped his coat in goat blood and gave it to their dad, he's saying, yes, all that was evil. You shouldn't have done that. However, God meant it for good. Something much larger came from it. He forgives them. He tells them to return home and bring Jacob to Egypt, their father. Jacob learns Joseph is still alive. Genesis 45, verse 25 through 28. The brothers tell Jacob, "Joseph is alive. He is ruler over all Egypt." Jacob is stunned. The text literally says his heart fainted. When he sees the wagons Joseph sent, it said that the spirit of Jacob revived. This is symbolic. The man who lived decades in grief suddenly becomes alive again. He's recognizing he still has his son. His son is still alive, and that means the world to him. Jacob moves to Egypt, Genesis 46. Jacob travels to Egypt with his whole family, 70 people. At Beersheba, God speaks to Jacob, "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there." This is important. The covenant continues. Israel will multiply in Egypt, or Jacob. The stage is set for the Exodus generations later, which we will cover on here eventually, I'm sure. Jacob and Joseph reunite, father and son. One of the most emotional scenes in Genesis. Joseph fell on his father's neck and wept a long time. Genesis 46:29. Jacob says, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face." But he doesn't die yet. He lives 17 more years. So he finally is face to face with his son that he hasn't seen for 20 years. That his brothers threw in a pit and sold to some traitor. So this is a very emotional moment for both Joseph and Jacob. Joseph, his son, who went to Egypt and went as low as a prisoner in Egypt, and then worked his way up to second in command right under Pharaoh. So this is the character that Jacob is seeing in Joseph. Jacob settles in Goshen, Genesis 47. Joseph brings Jacob to meet Pharaoh. Pharaoh asks Jacob, "How old are you?" Jacob answers, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130. Few and difficult have been the days of my life." Meaning, Jacob's life was full of divine activity, but also full of sorrows and constant movement. Jacob blesses Pharaoh. The patriarch blesses the king of Egypt. It shows spiritual authority over worldly authority. Next, Israel or Jacob prospers in Goshen. They settle in the best part of Egypt. For the first time, Jacob's family is safe, rich in land and livestock, and growing without enemy nations around them. Jacob blesses Joseph's son, Genesis 48. As Jacob nears death, Joseph brings his sons. Jacob crosses his hands and places his right hand on the younger. Joseph tries to correct him, but Jacob says, "I know, my son, but the younger will become greater," which is echoing or reflecting Jacob's position. He was the younger, and he was given the firstborn privileges and blessings. Jacob's death and burial. Genesis 49, verse 29 through 33, and chapter 50, verse 1 through 14. Jacob makes Joseph swear to bury him not in Egypt, but in the ancestral tomb in Canaan. He wants to be unified with Abraham and Isaac in death. When Jacob dies, Joseph throws himself on him and weeps. Egypt mourns 70 days, almost royal honors. A massive funeral procession travels to Canaan. Jacob is buried in the cave of Machpelah. Joseph forgives his brothers again. Genesis 50, verse 15 through 21. After Jacob dies, the brothers fear Joseph might now seek revenge. Joseph reassures them and says once again, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Joseph's death, Genesis 50, verse 22 through 26. Joseph lives to 110. Before dying, he says, "God will surely bring you up from this land." He makes them swear to carry his bones back to Canaan. So, that is the story, for the most part, of Jacob and then of his son Joseph, because he plays a crucial part in that. This was pretty long. I did not expect it to turn into this many notes. Jacob's life is very important. He's helping fulfill prophecy and lineage, just as many other characters in the Bible. He is most known for wrestling with God. His name changed to Israel after wrestling with that God. And he meets up with his son after 20 years, after his brothers did some heinous things to him, as he's second in command in Egypt. So this story is pretty lengthy and incredible, but I have a summary here to end it on. Jacob, a life summary. Jacob, grandson of Abraham and son of Isaac, lived around 2000 to 1800 BC, firmly in the patriarchal era. From birth, his life was marked by struggle and destiny. He emerged holding his twin brother Esau's heel, symbolizing the lifelong tension between them. Early life and prophecy. Before birth, God declared that Jacob, the younger, would inherit the blessing over Esau. He later purchased Esau's birthright, and through his mother Rebekah's help, received Isaac's blessing, cementing his role as the covenant heir. Life in Haran. Fleeing Esau's wrath, Jacob went to his uncle Laban's house, where he worked 14 years to marry Rachel, fathered 12 sons and 1 daughter, and grew prosperous despite deception and challenges. Return and transformation. Returning to Canaan, Jacob wrestled with God at the Jabbok River, receiving the name Israel, meaning he struggles with God. He reconciled with Esau, his brother, settled in Canaan, and became a patriarchal leader of his people. Family challenges. Jacob experienced personal and family trials, including the death of Rachel, Reuben's transgressions, and the Dinah incident, which shaped the future of his sons and the tribes of Israel. Joseph in Egypt. His favorite son, Joseph, was sold into slavery, but rose to power in Egypt. During famine, Jacob moved his family to Egypt, where he lived 17 more years, prospering and reuniting with his long-lost son. Blessings and legacy. Before his death, Jacob blessed all his sons, prophesying the destiny of the 12 tribes. He was buried in Canaan, securing the covenantal promise that would guide Israel for generations. In short, Jacob's life was one of struggle, cunning, faith, and transformation, from a scheming youth to a reconciled, wise patriarch. His story establishes the foundation for Israel, the chosen people, and demonstrates that God can bring purpose and blessing even from conflict and hardship. So that's Jacob's life. Jacob, Joseph. So there you have it. That is the story of Jacob. Thank you.